You straightened a picture frame in someone else's house last week. You didn't mention it. You just saw it, slightly tilted, maybe 2 degrees off center, and your hand moved before any social calculation could intervene. You fixed it. You kept walking, and nobody noticed. Which was fine. You didn't do it for them. You did it because something inside you, physically, could not leave it crooked. The frame wasn't yours. The wall wasn't yours. The house wasn't yours. But the discomfort was. And it didn't belong to your eyes. It belonged to something deeper than that. Something that registers crookedness the way a smoke detector registers heat. Automatically. Urgently. Without asking whether the response is proportional to the threat. You do this with everything. The drawer that doesn't close properly. You fixed it 3 times. The shelf that wobbles. The door hinge that squeaks. The Wi-Fi router that needed repositioning because the signal strength in the back bedroom dropped by 2 bars and nobody else in the household even noticed. You noticed. You always notice. The world is full of small, broken things that most people walk past without registering, and you walk past none of them, and you've never once considered this unusual, because it's been happening since before you were old enough to understand it was a pattern. But it is a pattern. And the picture frame was never really about the picture frame. If something just clicked for you, a recognition that landed somewhere behind your ribs, hit like on this video right now, so this reaches the other people walking through life, quietly fixing things that nobody asked them to fix. They need to hear this. Most of them won't search for it because they're too busy fixing something else. Let's start where it feels safest. Objects. People who compulsively fix objects aren't doing maintenance. They're doing something psychological that maintenance just happens to be the vehicle for. There's a concept in clinical psychology, first articulated clearly by Edward Higgins at Columbia University in 1987, called self-discrepancy theory. Higgins proposed that psychological distress arises from the gap between 3 versions of the self: the actual self, who you currently are; the ideal self, who you wish you were; and the ought self, who you believe you're supposed to be. When the gap between these selves grows too wide, anxiety, guilt, and agitation flood the system. And here's the part that connects directly to you and the picture frame. For people who grew up in environments where disorder had emotional consequences, where mess meant anger, and chaos meant unpredictability, and disorganization meant something bad was about to happen, the ought self fused with order itself. Being the person who keeps things straight, functional, repaired, that isn't a preference. It's an identity contract. A promise the nervous system made on your behalf before you were old enough to negotiate the terms. Fixing the crooked frame isn't about aesthetics. It's about quieting a discrepancy alarm that fires every time the external environment doesn't match the internal standard your childhood installed in you without your consent. And the objects are the easy part, because objects are cooperative. You tighten the screw, the shelf stops wobbling. You reposition the router, the signal improves. The feedback loop is clean. Effort in, result out. Control confirmed. Identity intact. Nobody gets hurt. Nobody pushes back. The object doesn't look at you and say, "I didn't ask you to fix me." It just sits there, repaired, and your nervous system exhales briefly before scanning the room for the next thing that's wrong. This is where it escalates. Because you don't just fix objects. You fix systems. You're the person at work who reorganizes processes that nobody asked you to reorganize. The shared drive that was a catastrophe of mislabeled folders until you spent an entire Saturday renaming and sorting every file while your colleagues were at brunch. The onboarding procedure that didn't exist until you wrote one at 11 p.m. because watching new hires flounder was producing a physical sensation in your body that you couldn't tolerate. The meeting agenda that you restructured because 45 minutes of directionless conversation was, for you, not just unproductive. It was painful. Genuinely, somatically painful. Like watching someone try to hang a shelf with a spoon. You can see the correct tool, you can see the correct approach, and the gap between what is and what should be generates a kind of internal noise that doesn't stop until you close it. And people at work love you for this. You're efficient, you're reliable, you anticipate problems before they become visible to anyone else. You've been promoted because of it, praised because of it, given more responsibility because of it, which you accepted without negotiation, because of course you did. More broken things to fix. That's not a burden. That's breakfast. But there's something Judith Herman wrote about in 1992 that I need to introduce here, And I need you to hear it without immediately defending yourself against it, because your first instinct is going to be to fix the discomfort this paragraph creates. And that instinct is exactly the point. Judith Herman, a psychiatrist at Harvard, published Trauma and Recovery, a book that reshaped the clinical understanding of how trauma survives inside people long after the original event ends. One of her central observations was the concept of reenactment, not flashbacks, not nightmares, something subtler. Herman documented how trauma survivors unconsciously seek out or create situations that mirror the original traumatic dynamic, not because they want to re-experience the pain, but because the psyche is attempting to achieve mastery over something that was never mastered the first time. The child who couldn't fix the chaos in their household grows into the adult who fixes the chaos everywhere else, not randomly, compulsively, because every broken system that gets repaired is a proxy victory over the original broken system that never got repaired, the one at home, the one with people in it, the one where the disorder wasn't a mislabeled folder, but a parent who couldn't hold themselves together and a child who decided, without deciding, that if nobody else was going to organize this family into something survivable, they would do it themselves. That child is now your coworker who arrived on Saturday to fix the shared drive. That child is now you. Tell me in the comments, and be honest with yourself before you type it. When you fix something that nobody asked you to fix, what does the moment right after feel like? Not the satisfaction, the thing underneath the satisfaction. Is it calm? Or is it the temporary absence of attention that's going to return the moment you spot the next broken thing? Because that distinction matters. And it matters most in the third panel of this pattern, the one where the thing you're trying to fix is a person. You've done this. You might be doing it right now. Loving someone who is struggling and pouring yourself into them, like grout into cracked tile, filling every gap, absorbing every tremor, showing up with solutions to problems they didn't articulate because you could see the problem before they could. The same way you could see the crooked frame, the same way you could see the broken workflow, except this time, the broken thing has a heartbeat, and opinions, and a history of its own that doesn't always cooperate with your repair schedule. Heinz Kohut, the psychoanalyst who developed self-psychology, wrote extensively about what happens to children who are forced into caregiving roles too early. He described a dynamic where the child's own emotional needs get shelved, not destroyed, shelved, in order to service the emotional needs of the adults around them, the parentified child. The one who learned to read the room before they learned to read a book, who understood their mother's mood from the sound of the front door closing, who calibrated their entire behavioral output to minimize disruption and maximize stability in an environment that had neither. This child doesn't grow up and stop caretaking. They grow up and expand the operation. The household becomes a workplace, becomes a friend group, becomes a romantic relationship, becomes a life organized entirely around the principle that if I can just make this person okay, if I can just hold this system together, if I can just fix this one more thing, then maybe, finally, the alarm inside me will stop. It doesn't stop. It never stops. Because the alarm isn't connected to the thing you're fixing. It's connected to the original thing you couldn't fix. And no amount of repaired faucets, reorganized systems, or rescued people will reach it because they're all proxies. They're stand-ins. They're the understudy performing on a stage that was built for someone who never showed up, and the audience of one, your nervous system, keeps watching and keeps saying close, but not the right performance. Try again. Fix again. Faster. Better. More. And here is where I need to say the thing that is hardest to hear for anyone who has organized their identity around being the one who fixes. Kristin Neff, a researcher at the University of Texas at Austin, has spent years studying self-compassion, the ability to direct toward yourself the same warmth, patience, and care you instinctively offer others. Her research consistently reveals a specific and measurable deficit in people who are chronic caretakers. They score high, often remarkably high, on compassion for others, and they score low, sometimes alarmingly low, on compassion for themselves. The empathy isn't absent. It's directional. It flows outward, with extraordinary force and consistency. And it almost never turns around. You will drive across town at midnight to help a friend process a breakup. You will spend your weekend rebuilding someone's resume. You will notice the hairline crack in someone's composure that nobody else in the room can see. And you will gently, skillfully, without making it obvious, help them hold it together. And then you will go home and eat cereal standing over the sink and not notice that nobody has asked you how you're doing in 3 weeks because you've made it so structurally impossible for anyone to see you as someone who needs asking. The picture frame, the shared drive, the person you love who can't quite get it together. They're all the same gesture, reaching outward to fix what's broken, because the alternative, sitting still in the presence of your own unrepaired interior, is a silence so loud it feels architectural. It has rooms, it has hallways, and you don't go down those hallways. You haven't in years. You keep busy, you keep fixing, you keep the world around you in such meticulous order that no one, including you, ever has to look at the disorder you've been carrying since before you knew what disorder meant. You're not a generous person who happens to fix things. You're a hurt person who learned that fixing things is the only acceptable way to exist in a world that once punished you for being broken in it. And the most painful part, the part I've been building towards since the picture frame. You know this. Somewhere underneath the capability and the Saturday morning repair sessions and the midnight phone calls and the reorganized kitchens and the people you've held together at the expense of holding yourself. You know. You've known for a long time. You just haven't stopped moving long enough to let the knowing catch up. So I'm not going to tell you to stop fixing things. That would be like telling a river to stop flowing. The current is you. It's been you for longer than any piece of advice can reach. But I am going to ask you to try something so small it barely qualifies as a change. The next time you spot something broken, a frame, a system, a person, and your body lurches toward it with that familiar urgency, pause for 5 seconds before you move. Not to stop yourself, just to ask one question. Am I fixing this because it needs fixing? Or am I fixing this because I need it to be fixed? Those are different sentences. They lead to different rooms. And one of those rooms is the hallway you stopped walking down a long time ago. The frame on the wall is still straight from when you fixed it last week. But the thing inside you that couldn't leave it crooked, that's still tilted. And no amount of fixing out there is going to reach it in here. You already know that. You've always known that. The day you stop long enough to sit with that knowing instead of solving your way past it is the day the fixing finally starts to include you. Subscribe and turn on notifications. The next video is connected to this one in a way you're going to feel immediately, and if this one landed, you don't want to miss where it goes from here. I'll see you there.